So right now there is a US-backed coup going on in Venezuela. So this is Juan Guaido, Venezuela's opposition leader, who declared himself interim president over current leader Nicolas Maduro, the country's leader since 2013. Now, Mike Pence tweeted out the U.S. support of this, saying, "Today, POTUS announced the U.S. officially recognizes Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. To Guaido and the people of Venezuela, America stands with you, and we will continue to stand with you until Libertad is restored." Now, this is a deep story, so I'm going to try and get pretty deep into it. But first, I want to just sort of lay the groundwork here. And this entire story is really summed up in this tweet. Today, an unelected, indeed an essentially unknown Venezuelan politician simply decided to call himself president, and the US, Canada, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Paraguay have all recognized him as such in the name of quote-unquote democracy. So this is exactly what is going on right now. Now, for me to lay the groundwork further on how this all works, on how American interventionism, how American-backed regime change works, let me show you this chart that I think explains it pretty well. Socialists get elected. U.S. sanctions and starves civilians. Uses starvation as justification for fascist coup. The people overthrow the puppet government. That's how this works. Now, it's not always socialist governments, but in terms of how the U.S. pushes for regime change, this is what they do. They sanction these economies. It negatively impacts the people living in these countries, and then they use that as a justification for regime change. Now, people need to understand, you can have a critique of the Venezuelan government or any government that the U.S. goes after, while at the same time also being critical of the U.S., the American push for regime change. So let me give you a little more context here in terms of the history on Venezuela. So this is reporting from The Guardian in 2013. Hugo Chavez kept his promise to the people of Venezuela. The facts speak for themselves. The percentage of households in poverty fell from 55% in 1995 to 26.4% in 2009. When Chavez was sworn into office, unemployment was 15%. In June 2009, it was 7.8%. Compare that to current unemployment figures in Europe. In that period, Chavez won 56% of the vote in 1998, 60% in 2000, survived a coup d'etat in 2002, got over 7 million votes in 2006, and secured 54.4% of the vote last October. He was a rare thing, almost incomprehensible to those in the US and Europe who continue to see the world through the Manichaean prism of the Cold War, an avowed Marxist who was also an avowed Democrat. So, if Venezuela was doing so well under Chavez, what happened once Maduro took over? Well, let me show you. So here's Venezuela's GDP annual growth rate between 2009 and 2018. Notice the clear drop-off from 2014 and on. So what happened? Here is reporting from July 2016. Starting in 2014, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia flooded the market with cheap oil. This is not a mere business decision, but a calculated move coordinated with U.S. and Israeli foreign policy goals. Despite not just losing money, but even falling deep into debt, the Saudi monarchy continues to expand its oil production apparatus. The result has been driving the price of oil down from $110 per barrel to $28 in the early months of this year. Remember, this is back in 2016. The goal is to weaken these opponents of Wall Street, London, and Tel Aviv, whose economies are centered around oil and natural gas exports. And Venezuela is one of those countries. Saudi efforts to drive down oil prices have drastically reduced Venezuela's state budget and led to enormous consequences for the Venezuelan economy. At the same time, private food processing and importing corporations have launched a coordinated campaign of sabotage. This, coupled with the weakening of a vitally important state sector of the economy, has resulted in inflation and food shortages. The artificially low oil prices have left the Venezuelan state cash-starved. prompting a crisis in the funding of the social programs that were key to strengthening the United Socialist Party. Now, there is blame to go around here. So you can absolutely blame the Venezuelan government for relying too much on oil exports for their economy. But there is also blame to go here on America. So when there is, I mean, we see this again and again throughout history. When there is a successful socialist economy, the United States puts sanctions on it as a way to starve that economy and then create a situation where they can blame socialism for that economy doing terrible, for the people in whatever country, for them doing poorly, blame socialism, even though it's because, at least partly because, of the sanctions put on that country. And then by starving them, they create the situation where they can then go in and either push for regime change or go in with military force as a way to then take the resources of that nation. Now, again, it isn't just socialist nations, but this is what America does as a way to grab the resources of whatever nation they want to grab. They starve that country, create a situation where they can then use an excuse to then go in and help that country, but use that that intervention as a way to really take over the resources and prop up capitalism. We see it again and again and again. Now, this, of course, wouldn't be able to, none of this would be possible without mainstream propaganda. The mainstream press that doesn't question the context, the historical context of what exactly is going on here. So a great journalist, Ben Norton, points out this context, the context that any article on Venezuela should mention. In every single case in modern history in which the U.S. has supported coups or regime change in foreign countries, the results have only been more oppression, repression, authoritarianism, misery, right-wing policies, corporate exploitation, privatization, and poverty. Every time. Now, did you see any Reuters or CNN or article from any other mainstream outlet mention this? No. And you're not going to find it because it's all part of this, whether you want to say it's intentional or it's this bubble where we don't question when the U.S. goes into other countries. Whatever the reasoning is, whether it's intentional, and in many cases, yes, it is intentional, or it's simply ignorance, they never mention that historical context. Now, you also might be wondering, hey, but how about when you see images like this of anti-Maduro protesters in the streets in Venezuela, painting this entire picture that the country wants regime change? Sure, but how many videos did you see of working class people in Venezuela that are protesting against Juan Guaido?
Que nadie votó por esa persona. No, nadie votó. Se le invitó a unas elecciones y no a una convocación nacional de unas elecciones y no asistieron, no participaron. ¿Cómo ahora ellos quieren asumir una autoridad que no participaron? Yo voté por Maduro, mi voto es por Maduro. ¿Quién votó por ese señor que se acaba de juramentar? Nadie va a votar por él.
Es un error garrafal.
Es un error garrafal, independientemente de todo, porque realmente aquí está el pueblo de Venezuela, aquí está el pueblo de Caracas, marchando en defensa de la revolución, en defensa de la democracia, no a la intervención imperialista. Estamos en este momento en una situación bastante delicada y llamamos al pueblo de Caracas a la movilización nacional y al pueblo de Venezuela a mantenerse alerta y no caer en provocaciones de este tipo que están haciendo la ultraderecha y la derecha en Venezuela, apoyados por los gringos, a buscar la intervención en este país. Nosotros estamos en desacuerdo, el pueblo trabajador, a esta intervención. Estamos en desacuerdo, ¿por qué? Porque siempre se ha mantenido esta posición política de querer intervenir al pueblo de Venezuela apoyado por los Estados Unidos. El pueblo de Venezuela se mantiene alerta y en movilización nacional.
So, there are crowds of people in Venezuela that are against this coup. But how many stories have you seen about that? Now again, as I said, this doesn't mean you have to love Maduro. you can still be critical of the Venezuelan government, but also understand that a U.S.-backed coup is not going to make the situation any better. So as Kyle Klinsky tweeted out, it's amazing how every time we take steps to overthrow a government, Saddam in Iraq, Gaddafi in Libya, Assad in Syria, etc., the narrative instantly becomes, quote, if you speak out against it, you're saying leader X did nothing wrong. It's like the military-industrial complex casts a spell. Exactly. You have to be able to hold two different thoughts at once. You can, of course, again, yes, be critical of a government while at the same time understanding that a U.S.-backed coup or regime change is not going to solve the issue or solve the problem in that country. And in many cases, or in most cases, the U.S. has led to the problems that that country is currently facing. Now, you may ask yourself, as I do, and many people do, why exactly is the U.S. doing this? Why are they backing this coup? Well, I mean, it almost always comes back to oil. So Venezuela is an incredibly oil-rich country. I mean, it can't be a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence that the U.S. puts sanctions on Venezuela when they were doing well. At the same time, the price of oil drops, destroys their economy, and then the U.S. turns around and then blames the Venezuelan socialist government for the situation that they're currently in. This happens again and again and again. And on top of the oil, Venezuela has also been pushing back and showing some fight against the U.S. by doing this. Venezuela publishes oil prices in Chinese currency to shun U.S. dollar. So that devalues the American currency, and they continue to do that today. They're also using the euro as a replacement, in addition to the Chinese currency as well. So not only is it about oil, but it's also at least has partly to do with the fact that Venezuela is willing to push back against what the U.S. is doing to them. Now, I want people to not lose sight of the irony or the absurdity in this entire story. This tweet went out from Pretty Bad Lefty, and I think it's just perfect. America is hilarious. Even while in the midst of a national conversation about how bad it is for foreign governments to subvert our democracy, we are trying to subvert others. Exactly. This is what is going on. And I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but it shocks me how easily people fall in line with the mainstream narrative on this. Now, look, it doesn't mean that, mainstream press or the mainstream narrative is always wrong. I'm not one of these people that question everything that always comes out. Of course, there are actual real stories that mainstream press report on, but this is not one of them. This is a coup happening in real time, and all the reporting on it just happens to ignore all of the historical context on what the U.S. has done with regime change around the world. I mean, isn't it kind of weird that these stories don't mention that these stories don't mention how oil-rich Venezuela is, how maybe the U.S. has some other motivations for pushing for this. Maybe the sanctions that Western countries have put on Venezuela have led to the crisis that they're currently in. Isn't it funny that none of these stories mention any of that context? So all of this is done to give you this idea that, oh, it's because it's a socialist government. Now, again, that doesn't mean the leader of Venezuela. It doesn't mean that Maduro is fantastic. No, but you have to understand it's a combination of issues. And the Western-backed sanctions on Venezuela absolutely play a part in this. Now, there are very few politicians that have voiced their disappointment, or, I don't know, I was going to say regret, but that doesn't make any sense. Voiced their displeasure with what the U.S. is doing here. But I will show you a few. So Ro Khanna was a leader on this. He tweeted out, with respect, Senator Durbin, the U.S. should not anoint the leader of the opposition in Venezuela during an internal polarized conflict. let us support Uruguay, Mexico, and the Vatican's efforts for a negotiated settlement and end sanctions that are making the hyperinflation worse. So, I mean, it's important to mention here, other countries are against what the U.S. is backing here. So Uruguay, Mexico, and the Vatican, Portugal as well has kind of rode the line on this, saying that Venezuela needs free and fair elections to figure out what's going on here. But they are not backing Guaido in his attempt to be the new president. So it's not like this is not cut and dry. Understand it's complicated even among countries that are allies of countries like the U.S. and Canada who are backing this. Now, there are also some other politicians that came out in response to this. So Tulsi Gabbard tweeted out, the U.S. needs to stay out of Venezuela. Let the Venezuelan people determine their future. We don't want other countries to choose our leaders, so we have to stop trying to choose theirs. That is, for all the criticism I've had of Tulsi Gabbard, I think that's a fantastic tweet and really lays out pretty much what you need to know about this story. Now, also in Canada, because Canada is backing this coup, luckily we do have a party, or at least members of a party, that are coming out against it. So NDP MP Nikki Ashton came out with the strongest response, saying this: PM Trudeau sides with Trump's regime change agenda and Brazil's fascist president in support of someone calling for a military coup in Venezuela. No, we cannot support an agenda of economic or military coups. Hands off Venezuela. So this was a rare, clear and concise message in against what the Canadian government is doing. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, I'm not even going to show his response because it's hard to understand what the hell he's even saying in it. He kind of rides the line, doesn't say either way what he supports. So I don't know. But at the very least, we do have a member of the party, or one of a few members, that have come out against this. Now, I want to also show you this response from a rare, well-educated member of Hollywood, and that's Boots Riley, the rapper and director. So he tweeted this out. So the U.S. is enabling an actual coup in Venezuela. If you've been worried about Russian bots influencing elections here, I'd hope you express outrage about this. And it's not about whether you think Venezuela is a good socialist country or not. It's about people understanding the influence that the U.S. and the CIA have on the world and conspiring to take down anyone who takes a bit of power away from the ruling class. This is exactly it. Understand the distinction here. You can be critical. I feel like I've said this 1,000 times, but you have to mention it because people are always saying, oh, so you support Maduro. You can be critical of a government and also understand that the U.S. should not be backing a coup. I mean, to be so concerned, as other tweets have pointed out, to be so concerned about foreign interests interfering in elections, and then to turn around and then literally back a coup in another country. How do you not understand the conflict here? Now, I guess to sum this all up, what exactly is going to happen now? So it's not, I mean, it's kind of anyone's guess, but let's take an educated guess with what has unfolded since this coup is taking place. So this headline here: Venezuela's Maduro gives U.S. diplomats 72 hours to leave after Trump recognizes opposition leader Guaido. Now, this is a move that the U.S., of course, is rejecting. So Marco Rubio tweeted this out. U.S. diplomats in Venezuela should present their credentials to President Guaido. Maduro has no authority to expel anyone. And trust me on this one. If Maduro is stupid enough to test Donald Trump by harming any U.S. diplomat, the consequences would be swift and severe. So this is how the U.S. sets up their ability, their justification for using military intervention. So if Maduro does, say, lock up American diplomats after 72 hours for not leaving Venezuela, then that gives Donald Trump the justification to then use military force to go in there and push for this coup. So, I mean, I don't want to be a betting man here, because if I were to bet, I would bet that this is not going to end well. But that's what it appears this is all set up for. So I try to be positive in my videos. I really do. But this story is just a complete shit show. And it's largely created by the military-industrial complex and just U.S. foreign policy in general. This idea of always pushing for regime change, always pushing to extract resources from countries that you are able to extract resources from. Create these governments that you can prop up, these capitalist governments that are going to turn around and benefit you. Or if they don't benefit you, you're going to ensure that the leader changes so that it'll be somebody in power that will benefit you. This happens again and again and again. Now, before I end this video, I just want to say that this will likely be demonetized by YouTube. Any video on that criticizes American foreign policy tends to get demonetized. It's kind of weird. So if you like what I do, if you like this video, you want to support the channel, go to therationalnational.com/join, become a member, and it just allows me to continue this sort of reporting, because you're not going to see a lot of actual a lot of deep dives on this story, because if you get any deeper than the surface, you begin to realize, oh yeah, because of the US and their history on regime change, what they're doing right now in backing this coup in Venezuela is not going to be good for anyone.